So, welcome to the DIY Toycast. I'm Gordon, joined with my co-host Brett, and we have a very special guest tonight, toy maker, musician, and ordained minister, Jesse DeStasio. Hey, Jesse,
That's
thanks for
true.
coming on.
I always forget I am an ordained minister. I got to use that parking pass more. I
Congratulations.
I yeah, it's not that hard, but thank you.
So, it's I thought it was really kind of a cool synchronicity today when you posted on Patreon that project that you did with Brett and sort of the history of it. Really ties directly into, what we're trying to talk about with this podcast. Um, and so I'm curious to hear a little bit more about those early days, back when you were, elbow deep in this stuff, actually doing this in garage spaces, doing this in, apartments, I assume whatever space you could kind of get your hands on. What was what was your experience like back then before you had access to sort of, I know you had Photoshop, but like 3D printing wasn't a thing. Was it like, it was probably like Maya for like 3D modeling if you were learning anything, right?
Yeah, Maya, you know, I went to college for 3D animation, and Maya was this sort of entry level program. And pretty soon after that first class, I was like, I don't want to do 3D.
Yeah.
I'm reverting to 2D animation, of which there was maybe four other students. Everybody had converted over to from traditional to 3D animation. And they were
Mhm.
right. That was the correct calculus to make. But I was just like, I'll draw every frame myself. I don't care. Um, it was interesting. There's all these anniversaries happening this year, and it's made me go back and look. And also, I had to sort of do this sort of data cleaning of all
Mhm.
my old photo bucket, 7,000 images. So I've been really like immersing myself in the past. And, my sort of creative career is broken down into these chunks of like 5 to 10 years. And, while I was in college, uh, I got my first job in the toy industry and simultaneously was doing the Subcultures Art of the Action Figure exhibit.
Okay.
Um, so I was creating my own characters and I had my own gallery show, and I was, trying to like get closer to that dream of being a independent toy creator. Uh, and then when I moved to New York City, there's probably about 5 years, being in college and doing subcultures and working at Jazzwares, and then play along, and then Jazzwares. There's like this 5 year period where then at the end of it, I moved to New York
Mhm.
and um, just gave up on having my own creations. I was like, it's not going to happen. I had landed a job at New Line Cinema, and I was like, I'm going to live in New York. I'm going to have this cosmopolitan lifestyle. That
Mhm.
was, that never came to fruition. Um, and I'm going to work at a major film studio, and that's it. Like maybe I'll do some uh, zines or paintings or art on the side, but my toy making career is over.
That's
Um,
interesting. I actually had sort of a similar experience during college of, in high school was very into using the library printer to print off copies of my hand-drawn comic book, drawing in classes
mhm,
constantly. Um, Went to college for Japanese language, and through that realized that if you're going to operate in the academic space, like you can't be talking about anime and like Kamen Rider all the
mhm,
time. You have to be like serious about stuff, possibly get work in translation or in a government job.
mhm,
And so I remember that sort of uh, period of like trying to present myself as a serious person and like
mhm,
hiding
mhm.
away all the nerd shit. So it's
Yeah,
interesting to hear that parallel.
yeah. It was a very seductive path in front of me because I loved Lord of the Rings. We were gearing up for Guillermo del Toro's The Hobbit trilogy, so it was like, why am I gonna waste my time and money and sweat on these toy projects or paintings that nobody's buying or interested in when I can just kind of throw myself into this amazing dream job and, be happy with it. So when we get to this Glyots project, which is
Mhm.
kind of a mixture of Glyos and the Mattel Guts line, this is sort of the first or second dipping my toe into original creation. There's probably like a couple projects going on at the same time, but um, it's me sort of utilizing Matt Doughty's system and kind of, feeling my way around it and figuring out how these joints work and what parts look good. And sorry, I have to cough very badly. I'm cursed. Anytime I go on a podcast, I just my throat doesn't want to
Yeah,
cooperate.
as long as you don't die on cast, we'll be good.
Yeah, that
It's almost
yeah,
happened. As you guys know, it's almost happened
yes.
a few times.
Yeah.
Um,
If I could just ask, when you were doing the Goliaths project at that time, were you doing any work with resin casting or anything like that? Did you ever dip your toe into that heavily, or was that kind of on the outskirts with some of your friends?
I did, and I found out I was allergic to the fumes of resin. So
Oh,
if
excellent.
I,
Fair.
anytime I would mold and cast, my entire face would break out in hives,
Oh,
and
good grief.
it could be just a very minimal amount. Some people um, have this allergy, some
Mhm.
people don't. I think actually Joshua Clutter has it, which is very ironic because they do so
Yes.
much resin pouring and things like that.
Right.
So I had wanted to, and I sort of started down that path, and I used to read the tutorials in Toy Fair magazine,
Right.
but that was pretty quickly a non-starter because of the allergy and because I lived in a small apartment. Not a lot of ventilation and things like that. So
Sure.
kit bashing and using Glyos parts was very appealing because I didn't have to you know, induce hives every time I wanted to sort of express myself in the toy form.
Now,
Um,
was kit
but
bashing
this,
something you always did? Like when we had Kenneth on, he was talking about how he would pull apart Joe's and sort of recombine parts, to make his own characters. So has that been something that's like a through line for you?
absolutely, I think that that first crop of Joe figures I had accumulated from myself at tag sales and inheriting from my brother, around the time I was, starting to be in my teens, I had taken every single one apart. So it was
Okay.
just this bin of all of them unscrewed. And I was like, kind of like starting to get interested in girls and,
Mhm.
sneaking out and going to parties and stuff. So I was like, I'm never going to put these back together. So they had a very sort of unceremonious uh, end to them. But yeah, customizing, using ketchup to put blood on them, like that was
Okay.
always a step in the play of my childhood. And, you know, kind of circling back to the start of the Glyots project, this was utilizing those old muscles and it felt really good. And it was
Right.
kind of, um, it was a very energizing experience. And there was, a lot of excitement in Glyos. I mean, there still is, but those were really the early days when, you had kind of like Jeremy Sung just starting to put together his projects. And it was really, a very beautiful and a very exciting thing because I had felt very lost. You
Mhm.
know, it, everybody who's like in college or has creative pursuits, you envision this life for yourself, especially back at, you know, I started college in 2000. So
Right.
the world was still a very bright, shiny place at that point.
Can't
It would
imagine
very
it.
soon, within a year's time, come crashing down quite literally. But at that point, it was like, yeah, hey, I'm going to go to school for animation. I'm going to design toys. The sky was the limit, right? Pre 9/11.
Mhm.
Um, so, getting out of college, being exposed to the corporate world at toy companies and then at New Line Cinema, um, you know, like I said, I felt lost. I felt like I posted a rejection letter
Right.
recently,
That
but
was
I
incredible.
just, I kept, stacking those up, it didn't seem actually like the overnight success narrative of, America was actually true. It started to, I became jaded.
Mhm.
Um, and so I kind of swore off art, and I kind of swore off making toys. And uh, you also start to enjoy what a steady paycheck is. And you start to enjoy, like, um, oh, New Line they do a summer barbecue at the aquarium in Brooklyn. Like, this is
Yeah.
great. I love my corporate overlords. I go to movie screenings all the time. This is fantastic. Um, so, you can, I don't know if it's still the case, but in the early aughts, that's a very persuasive, very seductive path to go down. And there probably is an alternate universe where I just did that, and maybe by now I'm a C-level, you know, executive or something. Who knows? But I
I
enjoyed it, and
mean,
also, like,
you're talking to two guys with day jobs and healthcare, so like we get it.
yeah, it's like,
No, 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 no. My wife provides the healthcare. Let's not get ahead of ourselves.
um, uh, but creating art and creating toys and creating comics was always a really crucial thing in every other step of my life. So it started to kind of bubble back up. I kind of agree with I think John Green said that um, creating artwork for humans is mandatory. It's not a pursuit. It's not a hobby. It's mandatory because every trace of humanity that we find, we also find art hand in hand with that, whether it's just primitive handprints on walls or cave drawings or whatever the case may be. It's not something we can just turn off.
Yeah, I think
Um,
it's a fundamental way we communicate with each other. And, it transverses language and cultural barriers. Like, all these makers in Japan or other areas of the world. And like, you know, I know you're not fluent in Japanese at least, but like, whatever their other languages you have, like it allows you to kind of reach that wider audience through communicating visually or through the music that you make or the videos that you make.
yeah. Um, so, when we get to the Glyots project and we get to these other things kind of coming into place, I did it. I self-published a graphic novel, Galator.
Okay.
That was also in this time period. We're going to celebrate that anniversary next month. Um, I started to sort of uh, feel the hunger come back. Like,
Mhm.
yeah, this is like I'm putting stuff out and it's largely being ignored, but it's deeply satisfying to me. And um, you know, all of this kind of was good. It was a good dress rehearsal for the next cataclysmic things that happened for me, which was one, working with Frederator Studios and meeting Nikki Fung and launching Toy Pizza, because
Mhm.
those things directly bring me to Knights of the Slice, the foundation of that. And, here we are 10 years later, with that still going strong. Um, so it's always, I kind of break my life up into these college years, and then the first entry points into working for toy companies and working for a movie studio, and then these lost years, this like 5 year period of time where Glyots comes out and Galator comes out, and my relationship with Doughty grows, and I start to think about Glyos in a more meaningful way. And then, like lightning, you know, I I cold email Fred Seibert. He calls me in for a meeting. I meet Nikki, I think probably that day. Within a few months, we pitch Toy Pizza. That's up and running. And then, the Knights of Slice Kickstarter happens, and, it's all sort of hyperspace from there.
Yeah, I mean, I remember finding your stuff through the YouTube channel. Back, it was in probably like around 2010. Does that sound right? Like
Yeah,
how?
sure.
And
Well,
so,
no. Wait,
no,
what year is it? It's 2025. So
right.
Toy Pizza is 11 years old. So it would have been uh, 2014.
Okay.
Not that, look, time doesn't mean anything
I
anymore.
mean,
It's all sort
yeah,
of collapsed in on itself.
but I like, episode 5 or somewhere between like 5 and 8, I remember stumbling across the channel. I remember watching a lot of the other Federator programming. I remember I don't know if you know PBS Idea Channel back when that was
Hmm.
done.
Sure.
But it was like early days of YouTube back when people would do shows like this and like I guess somehow get enough advertising revenue that it was a viable thing to do, or like how did that work back in the day for you as part of Frederator?
Well, there was two things happening at that time that led to this Cambrian explosion of YouTube, right? There was, I think it was called the YouTube New Content Initiative. I'm
Okay.
probably butchering the name of that, but um, Frederator was a recipient of that, as were 100 or so other channels, maybe even more than 100. Um, and basically, YouTube said, let's just act like we're a studio and greenlight these channels and
Okay.
see what they do. So they put tens of millions, $100 million into developing content for their platform. Very smart play, because I do not think that YouTube would have grown into the indispensable part of people's days, like myself, that it
Yeah.
is now, had they not uh, cultivated that talent. But what we ran into pretty quickly was they stopped doing that. And then also these mysterious algorithmic changes started to happen to where,
Mhm.
I think in the heyday, Toy Pizza might have made, I don't know, $2,500 a month, right?
Okay.
Not bad.
Yeah.
Nice little extra pocket change. It let us keep buying new and expensive toys to cover and things like that. Uh, to then not only not making that money for the content you're doing, but being punished for the content you're doing. If you know, if you don't repeat yourself, if you don't do another Frozen video immediately, you start to see your viewership drop off, uh, your videos get served up to less of a portion of your audience,
Mhm.
and this has been their game plan uh, since then. Like it's a nebulous monolithic thing. They never properly explain what these algorithmic changes are because they don't want people gaming the system.
Mhm.
But there's an interesting analogy here to what I had to go through today with PhotoBucket. I mentioned this before. I have over 7,000 photos on PhotoBucket from a decade of just my life.
Right.
That was the place to be before Tumblr and Instagram came along. Um, And so I get this email saying from PhotoBucket, we're going to delete all your photos unless you buy a premium account.
Yep.
And PhotoBucket became PhotoBucket because of the work of people like me, of the contributions of
Yeah.
PhotoBucket does not make its own photos that are popular, nor does YouTube make its own videos that are popular. It relies on the talent of creatives, and then the aperture just closes and they squeeze the talent more and more and more, and then they hold the content the talent made hostage, charge subscriptions, and the landscape sort of shift. This is the enshittification process. I've talked about this a lot. That's not my term. I think Cory Doctorow came up with that term. But none of this exists. None of the popularity of YouTube, none of the former popularity of PhotoBucket, or any of these platforms exist without us making the content,
Mhm.
right? And so it's inevitably a a sort of inequitable proposition that gets worse and worse the longer these platforms exist.
But I think
I
you've
forgot the question.
Well, you've clearly been through this enough, though, that I feel like you have developed a good sense of when it's time to have an exodus to, say, Patreon or Discord or whatever the next thing is going to be, because you've seen sort of the pattern repeat itself. And it's interesting. Do you feel like you're able to kind of carry your audience with you somewhat, like location to location, or is there always some die off each time the inchitification sets in on whatever the current platform is.
Well, I think we are sequestered in at Helm's Deep as far as audience migration goes, and I'll explain why. There's nowhere else to go, right? Because uh, in the time of this Glyots project 15 years ago, you had Photobucket, you had Tumblr. I don't know if Instagram was on the scene yet. Facebook was kind of taking on its own life. Maybe Instagram had just started. I was an early adapter there. But you had all of those things, right? And uh, we failed to regulate those companies as monopolies, as they were. I mean, there is testimony from Mark Zuckerberg in Congress saying that they bought Instagram to stymie their competition, which is a monopolistic practice that is illegal by the FCC's laws. We took no action whatsoever. We took no action against Meta. We took no action against Google and Alphabet, although they're starting to get some pushback from Europe. So we have allowed these platforms to be owned by 3 or 4 different entities, and anything that sprouted up as a potential challenge gets stymied almost immediately. You can see this with TikTok, right? That's being it's going to be a slave auction and owned by the US, and there's a whole bunch we can unpack there. But we're in this sort of end game with social media and with these platforms because we didn't take action some 10, 15 years ago to prevent this there's actually a better word for it, duopoly. Not really duopoly, but in any case, these 4 or 5 big tech companies owning all of it, right? It's bad for everybody. And, I don't know what the solution there is. So far, Patreon has been really great, and it seems to be sticking with its morals, which is not easy to do when you take sort of venture capital funds. But I also think the average person on the internet, Patreon may still be a foreign idea, and the idea of subscribing to something doesn't make sense, and the idea of paying an artist directly doesn't make a lot of sense.
Well, it's just like Netflix, but we actually know your name, as opposed to it's sort of a conglomerate corporation. Well, do you think with the online space becoming sort of more constricted and stuff, I would think that creates a higher value proposition for things like Toy Pizza Con or other small sort of DIY in-person events. You're not going to have the same reach necessarily, but if you can kind of transfer some of that online creative energy into these localized events, that's out of the reach of these corporate entities.
Yes, but with that, there has to be a sort of new discipline, right? Because I think that the idea for any creative that wants to sell their work and any enterprise really has been scale this thing to be as big as it can. Mm-hmm. And there have been certainly moments in the past with the Toy Pizza YouTube or with Knights of the Slice where there was potential for outside people to be involved, money to be infused, and the size and scope of my projects to become bigger, staffing up, having professional facilities, things like that. And I've never taken any of those opportunities, or they weren't the right opportunities. But that was the sort of conventional logic reinforced by every facet of society for anyone trying to do this stuff in the past century. And mm-hmm. even that little hangover period up until about the pandemic. So I'm glad I never scaled anything up. And now that we're post-pandemic and in the 21st century, I do agree. I think things have to be smaller. And I was just talking to somebody that I knew who owned a toy e-commerce business mm-hmm. when I first started. some 20 plus years ago. And he then transformed into a licensee, and he made product for all the brands that we like. And then in recent years, he launched his own figure line, and I ran into him at Legion's Con, and we got to catch up, and we had a call earlier this week, and he was, talking about, he's like, things just don't work the way they used to. We don't have diamond distributors anymore.
Right.
We don't, like San Diego Comic-Con has changed.
Mm-hmm.
It's so much work to have your own action figure line. And I was like, yeah, you're perfectly describing the situation. But you just got to think smaller and think cheaper and think more local. He was really impressed, and he had a great time at Legion's Con, and he made a lot of money. And I was like, that's the example. These are, it's a creative team. They're producing stuff at the top of their game. They have their fans, they have their community, and they get everybody together. And it's a relatively small show compared to something like New York Comic Con or San Diego Comic Con, or the bigger sort of local events. But they're smart in the way that they do it. It doesn't need to be as big as Designer Con. They don't need to have like an after party at a glitzy hotel with dancers and flame twirlers. They don't need champagne bottle service. I mean, could they use a step in that direction? Sure. Let's have something other than cold sandwiches, maybe. But they've done it right. They've done the correct thing. And I'd like to think that Toy Pizza Expo and our sort of annual gathering is that right thing as well. If nothing else, it feels right,
I mean, Brett and I wouldn't be here if something wasn't working. I think it's set off kind of, I don't know if you call it a freshman class at this point, but the
Sure.
pandemic / post-pandemic toy makers that are sort of coming out of this, having been exposed to, your generation of Glyos makers and YouTube creators and sort of smaller scale creatives who have made the process transparent to us, and like we can follow your work in a way that seems, if not, step by step replicable. Like I can understand that. Whereas if I look at something that's manufactured by Kenner or Mattel or whomever, you can only see the license and sort of the corporation. I don't know who sculpted it. I don't know how many people were involved in packaging design, engineering the accessories, doing the head sculpts, engineering the base buck, whatever.
Yeah. And I think also we're kind of entering into this very interesting era where the technology is obviously getting better and better. I look to you two guys as like, what is the bleeding edge of 3D printing and this flex material and CNC versus resin vet? Like you guys really, like, you are putting the hours in and then gracefully sharing it with everybody else. And I get a lot of my information from what you're doing, but it posits this interesting future where we're getting closer and closer to tactile playability that is so damn close to PVC manufactured goods.
It's
the
insane.
Technology is improving, the costs are getting better and better, or lower and lower. And then also, and we're gonna, December is gonna be a big focus on this. I think I can announce this. There will be a show at Clutter on.
Oh, excellent.
I should probably check. Let me just check the calendar. It is December, Saturday. I'm probably going to get a text from Josh tomorrow saying you shouldn't have announced it.
I mean,
20th.
It's honestly just your Patreons watching this anyways, pretty much.
Yeah.
Like,
no, after this, we're going to have 350,000 views.
Right.
You wait.
Yeah.
I'm going to be the corporate shill I've always dreamed of.
Yeah. December 20th, Clutter Gallery. We're having a show, and we will be unveiling some homegrown toy manufacturing.
Excellent.
So I'm very excited about this. there, more and more people are kind of figuring this out. I think we have our friend Mosquito
Toyworks,
Yes,
yeah.
Toyworks.
Max. Yeah, he's the
Max.
best.
Uh, Max was right next to me at DesignerCon. I always like seeing his work. He's interested in figuring this problem out too.
Yeah.
So there's this paradigm shift happening where people are getting back to the do it in your garage mentality. You have Max working on this problem. You have Clutter working on this problem. You have you guys, figuring out the 3D printed portion of this stuff. And it's sort of like, I don't know where it goes from here, but it's very promising and very exciting. Like it feels like the early days of the web. Remember freeware when it actually was free? Or
Yeah.
like going to like a GeoCity site and downloading the MIDI files for a song. Like
Or think back to when Kinko's was a thing and like everybody taking and making their zines at Kinko's or
no, fuck Kinko's.
okay.
But yeah, like, there was this early promise of the internet that was thrilling. Like everything in life was less important than getting on AOL Messenger when I got home, or working or writing the HTML to house a shitty picture on this bad AOL members page I had. Like all of that stuff was new. It was exciting. It was like you could not get me to pay attention in school because I was just thinking about this stuff. And it did end up being this monumental megalith that changed everything. Just unfortunately, 25 years later, everything got commercialized. Everything became about it being an advertising vessel. You have this infestation of bots to where, the dead internet theory has proven itself to be pretty relevant. More than 50% of all activity online is botted. So, what's going on now with the necessity of manufacturing things domestically and I shouldn't say manufacturing. That's a separate thing we can address.
Right.
The homegrown attitude and the technology getting better and better and people figuring out the Sofubi angle. It's all very exciting because then you don't need to sell 5,000 pieces
Right.
and, worry about shipping containers crossing the ocean. You just need to make 10 or 20 or 30 and get them to the right people. So, it's extremely, extremely exciting. And no, manufacturing is not coming back to the US. I think I've gone on that jag plenty of times.
No,
As
and
someone who
Large
works in
scale
manufacturing, it's not. We just saw a very major dental laboratory in the Pittsburgh area that had the monopoly on it. They had corporate buyout, and 2 weeks ago, 380 employees showed up to work, and the doors were locked, and the locks were changed. So great for us, but what do you do with these people? There's no jobs for them, and this is a very niche version of manufacturing.
Right. Yeah, yeah. Yeah. So it's we sort of, we broke that valve off in the 70s and 80s, and it's I don't have a lot of faith that it can come back.
No, I don't either, unfortunately. But moving on to the concept of greener pastures with toys and small events, what can you talk about, if at anything, about Toy Pizza Con next summer?
Um, well, I would say it's, I had two priorities for the end of this year. One was getting this December show and date settled, and that's settled now as of this afternoon. So my next thing is I want to lock in Toy Pizza Expo for next year right away. I want to give people ample time. I think in all likelihood, it'll be at the yard again. I think we will be back into the main space, the Toy
Okay.
Pizza presence.
Oh, excellent.
I believe 5 Points are going back to Brooklyn. They have
Really?
I think they have a new potentially multi-year deal with a venue down there. So, and it's completely amicable. Everybody's happy. So it will be interesting to see what Toy Pizza Expo looks like this year. Do we locally, are we more of a known entity and do more people turn out? or is it just us hanging out by the bonfire, which is perfectly fine. I don't think anyone would be upset
No,
with
no,
with that
I,
either.
yeah, I think either one of these is a net positive, right? It's either one. We're farming gold when we show up. So I
Yeah.
don't think it's bad either way. But I think about the first year I came up when we were at Happy Valley, and the organic traffic was very large. And then the
Yep.
following year, the first year at the yard, there was a lot of traffic. I mean, there was a very massive turnout. So
Hmm.
it could be very large. I don't know. We'll see. It remains to be seen. But either way, I know I speak for Gordon and myself when we say we're very excited.
Yeah, it's definitely been
Yeah.
motivating the projects that we've been working on, you know.
Oh, 100%.
Yeah. It would almost, last year it was like we were ramping up for Ultra Clash, which is kind of like the in between one, which I don't think it made a lot of sense for anybody to do that again. I think there's all these things that like happen once, and you're like, if you were there, it might be an unforgettable night, but it may never happen again. And I think in some respects, this past year, 5 Points and Toy Pizza together, that was like a one and done thing. It was
Mhm.
incredible if you were there. It was chaotic. It was beautiful. And that's it. Like it's another one of these one and done things. As I kind of like experiment and test these different ideas and events out.
Yeah, I appreciate that spirit, and that's something that's always made me interested in sort of whatever you're doing in the guise of, you know, your Patreon project, Knights of the Slice. I like that you throw things at the wall and see what sticks. And sometimes things may not come out the way that's expected, but to me, that's like the true creative impulse, as opposed to you find the thing that works and then you just keep doing that ad nauseum until I guess people don't want it anymore.
Yeah. Like I said, in a worst case scenario, if it's just us and Derek and Jake and if it's just the cadre hanging out, having some craft beer, having some of Habino sushi, like we're good. Like I
Yeah,
don't, it's not much more you can ask for than that.
no, and like this podcast is my trying to kind of extract some of that energy and get to have regular conversations with our friends from Toy Pizza Con who we'd only otherwise see and talk to once a year. And like it's not the same as being there in person. And like I'm very much looking forward to actually getting to share a pint with Brett and like, see you and get to show stuff in hand. But it's nice to kind of have that re-injection of creative energy every week as we do this. So,
Sure.
thank you
Who
for coming on.
who's on the docket? Who else you guys have? Who do you got on the list, and who's on your target list?
Oh, well, the target list is a big one, but coming soon, cohort and compatriot of Z Star 7, Brendan is on. So that's
Yeah.
exciting.
I I cannot wait to see him in the hot seat. I hope you guys do a lot of gotcha journalism with him.
Yeah. Yeah,
Really
don't worry.
grind him down.
Right.
Yeah, don't worry. Yeah, I'm the next Tucker Carlson, so get ready.
Yeah.
No, all jokes aside, I really would love to talk to Matt Doughty, of course, but I'm
Hmm.
sure he's as busy as the day is long, so that might be a hard one to secure. But we'll see. We'll see.
Yeah,
Um,
he would probably. I think we could probably come on as a duo. He tends
yeah.
to, he likes
A wingman.
he, you know, yeah, I think so. I think it puts him at ease, and so I think we probably could, but that might be a good like anniversary thing. Like you want to
Yeah.
make that something
Yes.
Yeah.
big
Oh,
and
a big
special.
deal one, of
Right.
course.
Yeah.
I really wanted to talk to Marcus too, because I love Bitfigs.
Mm.
I love what he's done, and I want to talk to him about, what it was like getting in with Matt, because Matt really is the belle of the ball when it comes to these conversations. But I always love talking to Marcus when I see him at the different conventions.
Yeah.
So I'd love to have him on.
I mean, I guess the short list is just the other Glios makers, all of which I think are they're all pretty happy to sit in, and all of them have their own unique stories.
Mhm.
That's part of why I like going down to Legion's Con because um, everybody's a character. There's not
Hmm.
anybody that is lacking in terms of like charisma or, you know, artistic vision or likes and dislikes. And sometimes it's like, it's really like a family in that, like, you know, you swear people may start swinging at each other, but that is kind of what makes it so great. It's this island of misfit toys, really.
Right. And then I am very, after experiencing 413 Fest up in New England with Gordon a couple weeks back, I'm really captivated with the vinyl scene recently. So there was some vinyl folks we wanted to have on to kind of talk with, some smaller end people, but just to see what their experience has been with overseas production. And now, of course, your experience with what domestic manufacturing looks like for vinyl.
Yeah.
Yeah, and there's still some, I would say, of the freshman class of makers. Like we got to have Cool Cat Toy Co. Grant
Of
on at
course.
some
Oh,
point.
absolutely. Yeah.
And OmniRes, I
Yeah,
love talking to Jake, so I'd love to
Sure.
have him on. And Ben Gillespie, he's not that he's much of a toy maker, but I'd love to talk, just talk to him about art, 90s RPGs and his experience with music and how he got to Nice to the Slice.
yeah, and I think
Yeah. I
it's
mean, sorry.
oh the
He's an amazing bass player.
mhm.
And also, um, let me throw this out there. I don't know if it'll happen or not. I'm making a lot of assumptions here, but what Brendan had come up with, which I think is an incredible idea. I think Gordon, we were talking about this together, right? Maybe it was Gordon's idea, but wouldn't it be cool if at Toy Pizza Expo the upstairs is in a lounge configuration
Yeah,
and we just have like all day jam sessions going on? So Ben can come with his bass and
Oh, that'd be
Marcus can be
sick.
on the drums.
Oh, and
Um,
then of course we have to
that
have Thomas Jonte up there to do the
right.
history of Myers
no,
in full.
no, fuck Thomas Jonte.
We love you, Thomas.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, Thomas.
Our
Thomas will be
ours
the perpetual opener.
Yes, our zine overlord.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I have a few more questions here for you, Jesse. Gordon, I don't know if you have anything left before I
No,
roll
fire
some of
away
those.
by all means.
Uh, so one of the things that really drew me into Knights of the Slice, Jesse, and really hooked me was your relationship with the old heroes and how you've integrated them into Knights of the Slice and what was your experiencing like bringing those out of the archives, and was that hard for you to navigate bringing something so cherished and meaningful into the public? These are very, very deep in the archives. Was that something you struggled with, or were you eager to do it?
Um, well, I think we should probably qualify that first because there may be people
Sure.
that aren't familiar. But the sort of old heroes subgenre Knights of the Slice refers to a childhood creation of mine that has kind of been reworked or brought into existence as a modern toy. Because um, when I was a kid, I would draw. I wasn't really as interested in drawing comics as I was just drawing like bio pages, like Marvel Update
Mhm.
89, and just drawing them as toys with their accessories. I couldn't really, didn't have the mind to like stick to a full story or full comic. So I just wanted to like envision these things as toys. So, a good portion of the Knights of the Slice characters are from this primordial stage. As far as like, I always approach it with enthusiasm. Um, it's always, like I saw these things happening when I was a kid. I just didn't know uh, the avenue I would take to get there, if that makes sense. Like I would look at like a Centurion's figure and I was like, oh, I could make my character like this,
Mhm.
you know, but without knowing the difficulties in that, I just always believed it would happen, right? Foolish childhood confidence or whatever the case may be, but it did end up happening. It took 40 years or however long, but these things did come to life. Um, so I'm always very excited and it feels very fulfilling like, finally, okay, another one we can check off the list. Um, but I think also, these are not, I've never made these one to one translations, and nor would I want to. I wouldn't want to be a slave to the details or the color schemes or even the original art. Like there is some level of touch up that happens to the art from my childhood to be presented as a character. Like maybe, it's a bit of Stalinistic photo doctoring, but I may, Photoshop out an accessory that I don't happen to have tooled in the hand of a
Okay.
character just to help ease the visual language, into the modern era. I may like the recent Adam Blaster character. It's probably the most recent old hero that's been done. That was just me, one being obsessed with Rocketeer, but also being obsessed with the DC character Adam Strange. Like I was not good at sort of obscuring these reference points, right? Adam Strange, Adam Blaster. Uh, and I don't think I ever even read an Adam Strange comic. I just would see the comics or see this character in ads, and I was like, oh, I don't know what this is, but he's got a jetpack and a blaster and a sword. This is great. Um,
What more do you need?
but like, but like that artwork, very faint colors on it, kind of purple, kind of red. Wasn't really sure. So I enhanced. I sort of like pieced it together in figure form, and then I was like, well, I'm just gonna adjust this original art to ever so faintly kind of match the current figure offering. Um, so it's a bit deceptive and manipulative, don't you think? But it is also it's my creation, so I guess I can,
I mean, that's
can do
also
that.
what I like about your, I don't know, your slightly more direct homages is I feel like you're able to extract from an existing design what makes it compelling or interesting and leave behind all, I don't know, the specificity of the licensed character. And actually, a lot of the Glyos makers have that, I think, of they have a good eye for what makes a design work because I think there's, you know, a good superhero design is not necessarily a good animation design, is not necessarily a good
Mm.
toy design. Those are all sort of different problems to solve. Um, and being able to think in a way that, like, what makes a compelling, articulated sculpture essentially is I think a sensibility that you kind of have to develop. And certainly me trying to make this stuff myself, like I appreciate how hard that is.
Yeah. Yeah. I think I'm going to test the limits of people's appetite for homages potentially. Well, like Gordon, I think
I mean,
Um,
I love them.
so
I think they're great.
we'll we'll see how people feel in first week of December. But you know, like I think it's more interesting to have a fucked up bastard universe version of a beloved character
Oh yeah.
rather than a direct translation or just their colorway. Like
Mhm.
I like having weird twists and turns to the iconography that we would recognize as, oh, this is clearly Adam Strange from DC Universe or whatever the case may be. I like the twist. I think in some respects the worst thing that's happened to creativity is the adherence of style guides and uh, 3D real scanning. I think
Mhm.
that like I remember having a Ninja Turtle bed sheet and they didn't look anything like the Ninja Turtles. Didn't look like the cartoon, didn't look like the comic, didn't look like the figures, but I loved how they looked on that because that was the sort of early days
Mhm.
and you could get away with stuff like that. And I think that you've talked about style guides and staying on model and stuff like that. Like, yes, I understand you need to do that as a IP holder, but I think it's far more interesting the kind of variations you get with bootlegs and um, having to utilize body types and sculpts that are not that character.
Mhm.
In the case of a Night of the Slice homage, um, to me that's far more interesting than just being able to duplicate a character one to one.
Well, it's a more creative solution to the problem because you're setting these sort of I don't know, artificial restrictions on yourself that you then have to work around through a more creative solution than, just the real scan of Tobey Maguire's face or whoever slapped on the buck body that you have. And there you go, ready to.
Yeah. And look, I've been on the studio side. I've had to deal with talent approvals. 100% understand why those parameters are in place. Those approval processes can get really hairy, and studios have a lot of money riding on licensed merchandise. So I understand it from a practical, legal, business sense. But when we get to doing what we do, it doesn't make sense.
Right. Well, we're operating at a scale where we can afford ourselves that freedom. Certainly Brett and I can. We can do whatever the fuck we want, basically, because we
Oh,
have the printers.
and just wait. There's going to be a lot of that real soon coming from me and our dear, dear friend Kenneth West. So stay tuned for that.
All right.
Yeah, there's gonna. I think through the end of this year and into 2026, there's going to be a lot of whatever the fuck Gordon and I want to do. So
Yeah.
we'll
Great.
see.
Brett, you got any more questions lined up?
No, not none that come to mind. What about you?
No, though we've been going for, I would say, close to our sort of normal program length. So, Jesse, do you want to like run through some plugs for anything that you got going? I know we're coming to the end of the year, so potential enrollment for next year, right? For Action Figure of the Month.
Yes. Yeah. I believe annual enrollments will start probably December 1st. If you're already enrolled, I think it auto renews. Yeah, I'm pretty zen about next year, but I do think also there's a very real possibility is the last year of the club. I know I've been saying that for 2 years or so, but it's very hard to calculate and navigate all of these bumps in the road. The pandemic really disrupted production as it had been the previous 5 years, and everything, all the terraforms and everything else have just continued to throw additional wrenches and everything. So, I I'm super excited about 2026. I think people are going to absolutely lose their mind with the first parcel, and we're hopefully continue to build on that. But then I don't know. The road may run out. We may be out of runway. So I would say if people think this is a meaningful club and a meaningful experience, it's time to look under the couch cushions and lock in either, a $30 monthly tier or a double tier or an annual tier. I need a mixture of both really. So,
Mhm.
but I think if I've tried to convey anything with all the stuff I do, it's that this stuff only lasts for a short time. Whether it's until the pressures of manufacturing make this business cease to exist, or whether my corporeal body gets hit by a bus, whatever the case may be, there's a finite amount of time for Knights of the Slice and Action Figure of the Millennia Club and my Patreon and me and you and everyone listening. So if it's exciting or interesting or you like getting mail, let's do this. Now's the time to kind of prepare yourself. And then let's have a hell of a 2026. That would be my pitch, I think.
Hell yeah.
It's a great pitch, and just to put some gas on that fire, it's worth noting with these insane price increases from companies like Hasbro, there are times in which Knights of the Slice is more affordable than an IP-based figure at retail now, which is incomprehensible to me in some ways. And also, I'm very appreciative because I know where to put the money at then. There's no question.
Yeah, I do think we've now reached this plateau where, I mean, somehow I became the better value, right? My stuff is
Yeah.
overpriced for what it is by weight or by unit cost, but you know I've always charged what I think these things need to be, and I'm still doing it 10 years later. And now, the giants of the toy industry have whether through greed or necessity or a mixture of both, they are now a far worse proposition of value than the stuff I make or the stuff any other Glyos maker puts out there. So, I'm very committed also to not raising prices, certainly on the club and in my store where I can. Obviously, there's a lot of mitigating factors to that, but I think that like there's kind of a ceiling of about $30 that you can reasonably charge for a 3 3/4 inch figure. Gauss armor and Cray, that's a little more complex, so that those don't apply. But yeah, I the club is sort of designed to be exactly what I would like to get in the mail and what would blow me away if I were 10 or 11 years old again. And I think we've done a good job of continuing that.
Yeah, I would totally agree. And I think that's an excellent point to end on. So, Jesse, thank you
Well,
so
one more
much.
thing.
Oh,
One more thing I
yeah.
would say. I think also that Brett's help with taking his time to get us additional parts added to the club. That has been a huge. I think it's a game changer. I mean, I talked many years ago about this potential of supplementing these
Mhm.
offerings with 3D printed stuff domestically, and Brett's really helped make that into something big. Now, November, December was so overpacked of a set that there was no room to do anything with Brett. But I got some ideas for January, February. I'll run by you very soon, and
Oh, hell yeah.
I
Very
I
cool.
think he deserves a spotlight for his
Yeah,
assistance on
totally.
these things.
And I'm
Well,
glad
well,
you mentioned that because of the drop today with the collab that you did on that Glyot's, homage, which we opened with. Like to me, that is probably the most exciting avenue that you're actively pursuing is, leveraging us as squires and fans and sort of in kind of the nascent period of the making, and then bringing that up to being part of the, small scale manufacturing piece.
Yeah, and Gordon, obviously, I can laud you with praise as well, but you also got an actual physical piece
Yeah.
into the Knights of the Slice mythos. So I don't feel like I have to really throw you all that many bones. Your legacy is already solidified. We're going to get Brett there. We're going to get Derek and Kenneth there
Right.
too.
yeah,
Everybody,
I, I,
hopefully,
I want in China, even if it's a foot or a knife or a gauntlet or something. I just want
yeah,
that
yeah.
plastic.
Right. We can
But no,
finally
I
make
think
the
over,
Franken Squire.
yeah, there it
yeah,
is. But no,
over a
and I
long enough time period, we'll make it happen.
excellent. But yeah, and I want to, I just want to thank you for allowing me the opportunity to help out and, you know, do some of my printing skills and, getting to work on the Rift Killer project it was a dream come true. It's my favorite sculpt and getting of the Kenner style, Cray's obviously my favorite by a landslide, but getting to work on that project, it was like, oh my God, this is it. This is the dream. I'm doing it. So thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. I got more problems to throw your way that need solving, so we'll talk soon.
Excellent. All right, Gordon, you want to close us out?
Yeah, sure. So thank you all for watching. You can find me here on YouTube and on Instagram at Vladimir the Batamir. Brett, you want to give your plugs?
Yeah, absolutely. You can find me at Aegis Station on Instagram and aegisbazaar.bigcartel.com. And Jesse, where can people find you?
The best place is patreon.com/Jesse DeStasio, and you can also look up ZStar7 on all streaming platforms for a little twinkling of the ivories, as I don't think anyone says.
I'm sure that's what they say. We'll be sure to put that in
That's what
the
they
show
say.
description. All right. Thanks,
Yes, and
everybody.
I'm super excited for Brendan next week. Everybody tune in for that. That's going to be great.
Yeah, please do. All right.
Yes.
Catch you next time.
Bye, everyone.
All right, cheers.